Dominic Cummings says he thinks the Prime Minister has acted illegally. What's your view?
The truth of the matter is we don't know the truth, and we've got scrapping between two very powerful men who seem more interested in who's lying about what and who's leaking what than the substantive of the issue. And that is that whether contracts get given out by text messages, whether tax breaks get given out by text messages, or whether the Prime Minister uses his pals to get money to have his flat done up. Whether I back Dominic Cummings' view or Boris Johnson's view, what we need is a proper independent inquiry where it isn't about two boys fighting and is about taxpayers in our country.
But in seeking to get an answer to these questions, is the Labour Party going to ask for an urgent question in Parliament this week?
I believe so. I should very much imagine that is the case as we return to Parliament tomorrow. But whether we get the answers, because Boris Johnson will often say one thing at the dispatch box, if it is even Boris Johnson or Rishi Sunak or their junior ministers who they often send out to fight these battles for them, whether we actually get answers that then meter out to any real transparency or integrity in the long run is very difficult to say. So we need that urgent question. We need members of Parliament to not think necessarily on party lines, but to be going after all of us in Parliament and all of us in politics. Integrity really, really matters. And so we've got to ask those questions so that people in the country can trust us with their lives. But we need an independent inquiry into this. This needs to be properly root and branch, not the Prime Minister calling up his best friends in different newspapers to have a pop at Dominic Cummings and Dominic Cummings touring round select committees or writing blog posts. We need to take this out of the hands of the people who, frankly, have got questions to ask.
Kier Starmer did say in the Commons this week that this is all about sleaze, sleaze, sleaze. But the reality is that if Labour were in government, and indeed when Labour were in government, you would have been lobbied, you would have faced very, very similar accusations.
Well, I can't say that we would have faced very similar accusations, but what the Labour Party is asserting to do now would be a rule that we all have to live by. And, you know, this is about what is happening right now and the contracts that have been given out unfairly, it seems, to businesses who can just get in touch with the Prime Minister. No one's saying that people can't lobby. What shouldn't happen is that people shouldn't be lobbying for commercial gain for them and their mates, and that businesses in my constituency should be able to lobby just as easily to get contracts to provide things that our country needs as Boris Johnson's pals.
But is it lobbying? Is it sleaze? If what Dyson was doing was an employer checking that his employees, not him personally, his employees wouldn't be worse off if they did something that they were being asked to do by the government. That's not sleaze, that's just good management, isn't it?
Well, it's good management that's not available to anyone in my constituency. So during the pandemic, there were lots of organisations in my constituency that had to change. There were lots of individuals who had to change tax arrangements. For example, people who went back to work on bank shifts in the NHS, their tax brackets would have changed. Did any of them have the text access to the Prime Minister? Whether, you know, people do things via text, it has to be open that is what is happening. And so when my companies in Birmingham Yardley want to look at contracts for PPE or ventilators, which many of them did, I was given a generic email address for them to email, which led to absolutely nothing. If only, you know, I could have been in a WhatsApp group sending gifts to the Prime Minister.
Peter Mandelson pointed out this week that skewering the Tories over sleaze, which obviously Labour is keen to do, won't be enough to win the 2024 election. It doesn't seem necessarily to be cutting through at the moment. If we look at the latest opinion poll, it gives the Conservatives an 11-point lead over Labour, despite all of these negative stories. Boris Johnson, a 41% approval rating, Kier Starmer, 33%. It's not great, is it, that given all of these stories over the last couple of weeks, Labour are still lagging this far behind?
The truth of the matter is I don't wish to skewer Boris Johnson for electoral gain. I wish to skewer him as a taxpayer and somebody who I want to see politics being made honest so that people can trust politicians and feel part of our system again. But, you know, what you're saying it's a totally fair assessment of the situation. But we're in a pandemic times and Kier Starmer has taken over the Labour Party, which was in a terrible position in a very, very difficult time where the country is focused on getting back to work, getting to feel healthy, getting to to feel like they can cuddle their families without being frightened of catching a disease, it's not a surprise that opposition politics is difficult at this time. But there's a long time before the 2024 election. And if I was to be completely honest, I don't want to skewer Boris Johnson. I want him to be better. I want him to be better for my constituents. I want him and his pals having a fallout, and him and his pals giving each other contracts because they're showing off to each other about who's the most powerful. That's the thing I want to skewer here.
We saw this week Kier Starmer in front of the cameras. He had a really awkward encounter in a pub, didn't he? Where the landlord wanted to present him with some information and then didn't want him in the pub at all. What did you think of that encounter? And did you think that the central exchange was central charge of what the landlord said to Mr. Starmer was that he's failed to hold the government to account? Do you feel that he's held the government's feet to the fire enough?
Yeah, yes, I do think he's held the government. I don't agree with the thrust of what the publican was saying, as if somehow lockdowns weren't necessary. And in fact, in the papers today, there's all sorts of things about whether Boris Johnson, terrible things he's alleged to have said, maybe by Dominic Cummings, who knows, about whether we have lockdowns regardless of the amount of people who died. Look, there was a simple thing that had to be done. We had to stop the virus, and I don't agree with the publican on that. But the idea that we haven't held the government to account, the government has U-turned many times throughout this crisis, and it's not fair to say that that isn't because of the actions of the likes of Kier Starmer and his team. The sleaze conversation that we're having is a partnership between very good investigative journalism and Rachel Reeves on the Labour front bench has been saying this again and again, not just after these recent revelations, but for the last year, and their feet are held to the fire.
But do you think, I mean, looking at how Kier Starmer dealt with that, you know, he sort of didn't interact, he tried to walk away, and then he then did interact. It's these kind of situations and election campaigns are always a test of instinct, aren't they? Do you think he does have the right instinct? Because if we look at sort of the red wall seats and we look at, you know, the West Midlands area where you are, the Conservatives are still doing better. Shouldn't Labour have cut through by now?
I'm not sure that if, I don't know, Kier Starmer had tried to lamp the landlord, that we would be cutting through in the Midlands.
I was suggesting maybe have a conversation than necessarily throw a punch.
To be honest, I think he was incredibly calm in the face of a difficult situation, which is actually what I want from my leaders. I don't want, when they're faced with challenge, that they start ringing around journalists to have a pop at their mates to say it isn't the difficult times we should be focusing on, it's because so-and-so said so-and-so about so-and-so. You know, actually what I want to see from my leader, and what I think cuts through from that exchange about Kier Starmer, is that he is a calm and safe pair of hands, and all power to him. You know, I'm not sure I would have been so calm.